Good morning. Welcome to the USJI seminar on the interaction of young people in the United States and Japan. I'm Katsuichi Uchida, president of this USJI, and also the vice president of Waseda University. Since the establishment of the USJI in March 2009, we have continuously held the USJI Week twice a year, usually in February and September, and conducted monthly seminars on various topics concerning recent Japanese politics, economy, society, culture, and so on. The USJI encouraged policy-related research among Japanese academics and tried to introduce policy-implied research results to wider American audiences. In Japanese saying, "Ishi no ue ni mo 3 年," if I translate literally, sitting on the rock for 3 years brings success. And I hope that we have achieved a limited success in spite of small budget. People both in the US and Japan recognized and appreciate the existence of the USJI. I would like to thank all the people who give us advice and help and participated actively. By strengthening our efforts to increase participating universities and to raise funds, we'll be able to attain much stable situation and contribute to the mutual understanding between the US and Japan. We expect your positive participation to our activities. This week, from Monday to Thursday, we have seminars on several issues, and on Friday, with the cooperation of JSPS, Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, we have one-day seminars on risk management from natural disaster to economy. I would like to ask your active participation. Then this morning, I will serve also a moderator on the interaction of young people in the United States and Japan. In this session, during the first part, we have speakers from Tohoku and Waseda University student faculty. Then we will receive 2 presentations from the United States participants. I'd like to explain the purpose of this session. We are all the participants of this session too recognize the importance of the interaction of young peoples between the US and Japan. However, the number of Japanese university and graduate school students studying abroad in the United States decreased. Some people see this as a sign of inward-looking or introspective Japanese youth. With regard to this phenomenon of the decrease of Japanese students studying abroad in the States, we need to examine whether this comment is correct or not. And if so, we need to identify the causes and reasons for this. Japanese Ministry of Education and organizations in the United States started several measures to change this situation. So we also need to evaluate the possible result and effect. With regard to this issue of introspective Japanese youth, however, we found our new different tendencies. After the Great East Japan earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear power station incident, a lot of students participate to volunteer works to help to reconstruct devastated areas. Even before March 2011, we saw the involvement of students in the volunteer activities in many fields. This morning, we invite 2 groups, one from Tohoku University, situated in Sendai, the main city in northern part of Honshu. Professor Tsushimura Matsu and Miss Eri Watanabe, an undergraduate student. They will talk the situation of devastated areas and also Tohoku University's effort to reconstruct Tohoku or northern part of Japan. And from Waseda University, an associate professor Chika Hyodo and Miss Yuko Fujishima, a student project member, explained their volunteer activities in Fukushima areas. These 2 presentations showed new situation in Japan the transformation of mindset of Japanese youth. After this presentation, we will receive comments from two speakers from the United States. Mr. Mark Knacker, Director, Office of Japan Affairs, U.S. Department of State, will explain Operation Tomodachi, a public-private partnership that supports Japan's recovery from disasters and invest in the next generation of Japanese and Americans in order to strengthen cultural and economic ties and deepen the friendship between the U.S. and Japan. He will comment also on the issues of so-called introspective Japanese youth. Mr. Daniel Obst, Deputy Vice President, Institute of International Education, will discuss the decrease of Japanese university students studying abroad in the United States. He will show present situation of Japanese students and examine the reason for the decrease of the Japanese students here in the States and introduce new measures in the United States in order to attract Japanese students. And after these interesting presentations, we would like to discuss many related issues on the interaction of young people in the US and Japan. And this session is also supported by the USJI, US-Japan Council, WOJAS, Waseda University Organization for Japan-US Studies, and the CALCON, the US-Japan Conference on Cultural and Educational Exchange. The CALCON will celebrate 50 years anniversary this April. And there will be a US-Japan Higher Education panel in Tokyo on April 9th with the Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, with 7 Japanese universities selected by the program called Reinvesting Japan Project and CALCON. So today's 2 sessions are the first event of the CALCON as well. And also at the top right side of your papers, you find the symbol of cherry blossom. So this week, USJI's week is also the kickoff event of the sentimental celebration of the gift of sakura to Washington, D.C. And then I have to mention just one thing. The use of camera and video or audio recording devices during the DVD portion of the presentation is strictly prohibited because of the privacy and intellectual property rights reasons. Thank you for your cooperation. And so I would like to ask the 2 speakers from Tohoku University first. Ms. Eri Watanabe, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Eri Watanabe, and I'm a second year graduate student of Tohoku University, and I'm also a student assistant of Tohoku University Volunteer Support Center. Today, I'm going to talk about some volunteer projects I have involved in after the 3/11 mega coup in Eastern Japan, and what I have discovered through all my experiences. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself briefly. I was born and brought up in rural area of Yamagata, which is a neighboring prefecture to Miyagi. And I moved to Sendai, where Tohoku University is located. So I have lived in Tohoku all my life, and except for 1 year, I have studied in Britain when I was 16. And when the earthquake happened, I was on the campus. And then I stayed at my evacuation shelter with my friends. Soon after the calamity, I started volunteer work. At that time, the priorities of volunteers are jobs such as distributing food, sorting commodities sent from all over the country, or clearing the street of rubble and desperate houses as you see now. I knew that even if we remove the level from the residents or towns, the people could not start to live there immediately. But at the time, we have to do something, we have to work to step forward, however small the step was. 2 months have passed. After the new semester began, I could not commit to doing volunteer work every day, and the demand of survivors had gradually changed too. For example, children needed mental care or just opportunity to have fun time for change. So students in my university, especially foreign students, started to visit elementary school in coastal areas and conducted English class every month. And this was another occasional activity I have enrolled with. After the earthquake and accident in Fukushima, the number of tourists dropped sharply, and Matsushima, one famous tourist site in Japan, also struggled with economic difficulties. 311 movement was organized by Tohoku University students to solve such problems. Through the process of working on these projects and volunteers, we came up with a question: what can students do for revitalization of Tohoku region? Are there anything students without experience or knowledge can do? As you know, it's not easy to evaluate volunteer work, so organizers and volunteers have to group to find their own way. However, carrying out their particular project, I was able to find the answer to this question. The project was TEDx Tohoku. Okay. By the way, how many people here have ever heard of TED conference? Is it like the hand, please? And how many of you know about TEDx event? Okay, thank you. I'm going to explain what TEDx is quickly. TED, TED, originally started in America, is now an international conference with the purpose of sharing ideas while spreading. TEDx is a local, self-organized event which has already been held in more than 60 countries, including Japan. And last October, 20 students studying in Sendai organized TEDx Tohoku for the first time in Northeast Japan with the theme of 311 disaster. And we invited 12 speakers who are taking active part in revitalization, and we have 500 attendees and 6,000 viewers on Ustream on that day. But what was so amazing about this event was this was totally organized by students. Now let's go back to the question. My friends and I have faced a lot of difficulties to carry out those projects, and we could not overcome some of them without the support of older and skillful people. On the other hand, I realized that while there are many things students could not do, there are so many things only students could do. Because they usually have more vitality, originality, flexibility, accessibility to information, etc. To give an example, like being a bridge, students in TEDx Tohoku made new connection of people, connection of different projects and ideas. So those people who have never met before TEDx now know each other beyond difference of nationality, age, and profession. But how did the disaster motivate students? Since Tohoku has been conservative and a rather backward region, probably before the disaster happened, probably people would not have counted on or supported students. But there were kind of social changes, and people welcome new movements today. Also, I and many of my friends had never imagined we can make change in our own communities. So now we have more confidence. And moreover, new model of business, community, administration, and NPOs have been born around us since 3/11, and this is making Tohoku a kind of frontier for everybody who is anxious about their future society. And this is how the disaster helps students grow. Although the earthquake and tsunami brought much damage and loss, this event left us a big chance to reflect on our lives, to value traditional community spirit or primary industry, or to solve hundreds of problems which have existed long before the calamity. And there are 3 more reasons that I believe we can build better future for Tohoku and Japan. I think just the fact that many students have started working for localities is more important than whether or not they have attained certain goals. In Japan, it has been said there are no charismatic leaders and young people are apathetic about their society. However, numerous people, especially young people, took initiative for revitalization today. This means local young leaders appeared around Tohoku, and I expect some of them will make important breakthroughs in the future. So many people came out of their own shell after 3/11. Young and old, man, woman, each of them having different ideas and different talents, made their own contribution. So even if individuals or students cannot make big difference right now, meeting of ideas beyond difference of generation, profession, nationalities will create more solutions for problems in Tohoku in the long run. So therefore, what we are doing now is not just finding solutions, we are inventing solutions. In addition, Tohoku has achieved global attention and support. Those pictures were sent by students and friends all over the world. So Tohoku and Japan will express their gratitude to the world in the near future by giving feedback and providing a model for future crisis control and social interaction. And I'd like to play a role in this myself. What I can do as a student is build lots of bridges between Tohoku and outside world and harmonize the traditional community and modern technological ideas. I hope someday the movement rising here in Tohoku will change the future of Japan as well as the world for the better. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your involvement into the volunteer works and also your future prospects.
Okay, for more information about TEDx Tohoku, please check our website. Now we are organizing TEDx Tohoku this year again. And you can see 12 inspiring videos online, both in English and Japanese. And we appreciate if you share the video and today's experience with your colleagues and friends. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I would like to ask Professor Muramatsu.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to talk about this title, the disasters bring us people to find. As you know, Miss Watanabe is also growing up to find. So the disaster is very good, awful incident, but we overcome such phenomena to he is growing up now. As you know, so he is trying many things. So I talk about the overview of this disaster totally, and we present the voluntary works of the Tohoku University. So finally, I want to say that we wish the success support from you continuously. So anyway, so I introduce myself briefly. My name is Atsushi Muramatsu from Tohoku University, but my research field is material science and energy catalysis. It's not different from the voluntary works. But I born at 11th March 1989. This date is just before the disaster date. So I graduated from the University of Tokyo. Then I get a doctorate degree of engineering. Then I married at 11th March. So it's a memorial of the marriage, the same date of the disaster. So I cannot forget that disaster. So this is the voluntary works histories. First of all, I experienced the great earthquake in the west side of Japan on 7th January 1995. So we went to this area to help the disaster people. So next 2000 years, so we have a lot of the volcano eruptions. On spring, the Usudan eruption, and the autumn, the Miyake-jima eruption. So many people escaped from the field. So we help them to recover the field. So this is my voluntary experience. So near my Tohoku regions, so we experienced the North Sendai earthquakes. Several earthquakes happened in 2003. So we make up some temporary housing at these earthquakes. So this experience is we got lead to this disaster. Now I'm the advisor of the Tohoku University student volunteer team HARP. So I briefly introduce this disaster. The 3rd March 2011, 1456, the earthquake occurred. After 30 minutes, tsunami attacked the shores. So around 20,000 people were dead or missing. Still now, over 3,000 people is missing. Our university is located far from the shore, so the Tohoku University was destroyed only by the earthquake itself, but the whole building was destroyed. So that it damaged some of this one. So very, very huge amount of is needed. So Japan government help us to make a building again now. So the Tohoku University organized inquiry groups to look into the tsunamis compositions. I mean the fat element included and so on. This picture is taken by some people accompany with me. So I went to the disaster area to look at this phenomena and hear and feel and smell them. It's a table. So briefly, they introduce the damages. This figure shows the classification of the deaths by sex and age. So you can, this one, the solid line means the population composition of the disaster area. So two classification is different. As you can see easily, the aged people rather dead. Okay, so because the tsunami attacked only 30 minutes just after the earthquakes. But the tsunami is expanding from the shore to the 10 kilometers. The 80 people cannot escape the shore for the short time. And so then we lost the 80 people. So also the handicapped people, so many handicapped people were lost. The totally 20,000 people dead. So next is the reason for this. The 90% is the way. What's the height of tsunami? So you can see this is a prefecture's name, Aomori, Iwate, Miyagi, Fukushima, Ibaraki, and Chiba. So the Lake Takata is the so-called Sun Lake regions in the northeast Japan. The height of tsunami is recorded as 15.8 meters. So over the third floor. Okay? So you can see here the Fukushima nuclear power plant 1. At this one, 13.1 meter tsunami recorded. So this tsunami attacked the power plant. So the incident occurs. So next, this one, upstream height. The tsunami go up along the river. So the actual data of the height of tsunami and the upstream height. The Iwate, Miyagi, Fukushima, Ibaraki, and Chiba. So you can see the Iwate prefecture. So the Miyako is one of the ports. We recorded 38.9 meters. Okay, so it's a very high. Those tsunami attacked the people, the housing, the cars, and so on. So also the earthquake is very often. So this figure shows the number of aftershock more than the magnitude of 5.0. This earthquake is a typical one in Japan. Compared with them, this disasters including so many aftershocks after the main earthquakes. This is the Operation Tomodachi. Introduce you. This is the Sendai Airport near it, also attacked by tsunami. So many US people came to the hometown, Sendai. They cleaned up the Sendai Airport. So just early April, we can use the Sendai Airport. So first flight from Sendai Airport. Then near Sendai Airport, somebody like that drawing the arigato. We deeply appreciate the kind support and help. Also, we expect to continue. So the next, we switch to the volunteer activities. This photo is volunteer activities in a few areas. So they help to the people to clean up the inside of housing. Our university, the students organized the Regional Reconstruction Project Hub as a student volunteer team. It's founded on the March 24th. So it's only students organized. Okay, no, we don't say, please make organize or not. So don't say, I don't say. So the students voluntarily organize this teams. I'm very happy at this organization. So in maximum, around 1,000 students registered this volunteer team. So activity, the first phase, from the April to July 2011. So their activities are listed here: the removal of modulables, supply and support to education centers, various assistance support. So totally, more than 10,000 students are participated in this activity. So the Tohoku region people, thanks to us, the Tohoku University, from so many students participated in this activity. So after that, these people is moved to the temporary housing. So after that, this volunteer team's objective is switched to the second stage. So three main objectives listed here: the recovery of Tohoku University library. Library is completely destroyed. So still now we don't get the library. Not open now. But many students now reconstructing the library. So second one is the field mastered project for recovery farm. The farm is covered with the sea water, including the chloride, sodium, and so on. So, but field mastered is play a role in the removal of such salts to get a good farm. So the students make an effort on this project. And thirdly, the study support to children. The children, both primary school children and junior high school students, and many students lost textbooks by tsunami. And also the many textbook and examination textbook and so on. So we support to such students. So our volunteer team HAL is divided into the many groups after the second stages. So the 3-point movement is introduced by the Miss Watanabe. The other is all for Tohoku, around Sendai, Tohoku Ronet, and Nibu. This volunteer group is organized by the Tohoku University students. But you can see the report of the Social Welfare Council in Japan. This figure shows the decrease in volunteer activity in the disaster area. But zero is means the disaster earthquake day. This number is the number of weeks after the 3.11, and the weekly number of the volunteers. So maximum is recorded at the Golden Week holiday. In Japan, the Golden Week holiday we have. So the early May, the 3 national holidays and the Saturday and Sundays, they compose and the Golden Weeks. So many students went to the Tohoku region to make volunteer activities. So, but you can see here that after that decrease. So Fukushima's case is very important. I mean, the Fukushima. You imagine Fukushima? It's maybe the power plant accident. So many students avoid the Fukushima area to go to the Iwate or Miyagi. The Fukushima, they do not recover yet. Okay? So it's a very important and significant problem. So we gathered volunteers from all over Japan to the Fukushima. The volunteer activities, generally speaking, it's a support to disaster people and aged persons. But the kind of rescue needs a gradual change with time after disaster. The earthquake day, we need the evacuation guidance and confirmation of the safety. Then the establishment of evacuation centers and invulnerable. So after the disaster people move to the temporary housing, so the care of the temporary housing and the continuous care of the disaster victims are needed. So the voluntary activities itself is changing with the time. Okay? So the students should teach their idea from the just the day to the now. Okay? So example to support the volunteer now, the listening is very important. So the exchange with aged people as listeners is very important because aged people is always a thing. So aged people lived in one apartment, temporary house. So without any person, only one thing. So we should volunteer go to the aged people to listen their conversation. So study support and the recovery of the farmer and the rice field and the river and fishing equipment and support to these people. These items are very important in this stage. So I think the future structure is here. The deemed temporary housing. This is the apartments and lodging houses temporarily taken over as a temporary house. It's not constructed. It's private apartment and some companies' apartment housing is temporarily taken over to the people. So since it is the congregate housing, the assistance cannot be reached, generally speaking. So nobody knows who lodges this apartment. In the case of temporary housing, we know who is living here, who is somebody so on. But deemed temporary housing is the spread in the area, very big area. So in many cases, very big elderly single populations. So also in the temporary housing, human event temporary housing occurs. The many frictions. So because after the first disaster, 1 year passed. The mentally the limitation is now for the whole of the disaster people. So something they got angry. Something gets too painful. So the friction occurs so many times. So including violence to ladies is a very big problem. Also vulnerable people, lonely death and aged and disabled people occur. So we should support them. The final slide is that we plan to hold the 3.11 student volunteer assembly on just 1 hour late after this day at Tohoku University. The assembly including the remembrance ceremony also. And the evaluation of the past support to the victims, considering their future support, planning to the volunteer activity and the standby support, building the bonding between the participants. And we deliberate about future Tohoku region is our hometown. These are kick-off meetings of the continuous support and assistance to the Tohoku region. So this is just 1 month ago. You can see the some disruption still now. Also the Ishinomaki and the Minami Sanriku. All of nothing, but you can see that some buildings are located on it. It's just the distance area. Nobody lives here. So the people should move to the novel field from here. So we should continue the support and care to the disaster people continuously. So if you have never gone to the disaster area regions, you must come to our hometown in order to see, listen, and feel the tremendous trials and tribulations. But you can see also the starting beacon of the hope. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Muramatsu, for your presentation. Next, I'd like to ask to invite two presentators from ASEAN universities. And as I've mentioned before, the use of cameras and videos or audio recording devices during the DVD portion of the presentation is strictly prohibited. Professor Kyoto.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everybody. My memories of that day are still very clear. When the huge earthquake happened, I was in the office and for a few minutes was holding on to my printer as it was a lifesaver, which was so wrong from the safety standard of disaster. But it shows that it is not easy to think rationally when one is in a panic. When we tend to lose the rationale, I feel that it is very important to think about what is one's own expertise, which we have been doing, because that is what we should do. For WABOK, the Volunteer Center of Waseda University, it is to provide the students the opportunities to do volunteer activities in the field. For the last 10 years, WABOK as a university institution has been working with 3 missions to bridge the society and the university, to provide a wide range of opportunities for the student to learn through experience, and to encourage students to contribute to the society. Respecting these 3 missions, we have sent more than 1,500 students to Tohoku region since the earthquake occurred. The content of the activities varies. At the first stage, many of the students in their safety helmet were cleaning mud from the shovel, from the tsunami with shovels. We call them the mud busters. Apart from that, their activities include music, sports, tutoring students, etc. Today, I would like to introduce one of those activities which I have organized. It is to support the high school students in Fukushima. As you might know very well, these high school students are the victims of nuclear plant crisis in Fukushima. WABOK students went to Fukushima to tutor them in the summer and winter of last year. In line with the theme of this session, possibilities of the young people, as Dr. Uchida explained before, I'd like to show the concrete example of our students. For this objective in my presentation, first, I'd like you to watch a short 15 minutes movie that my students made to convey their messages. After that, one of the students who joined this project, Miss Yuko Fujishima, will talk about her experiences. Lastly, I will make my commentary. As you can imagine, there have been millions of stories about this catastrophic event in Japan that happened last year. Here is one of the stories which my student made, called Letter from Fukushima. Ladies and gentlemen, please watch the movie.
ペイちゃんから届いた一通の手紙。僕は手紙を見つめながらあの夏の1週間を思い出していた。僕は都内の大学に通う4年生。3月11日に震災が起きた。何かした方がいいかも。そんな思いで僕はこの夏ボランティアに参加した。学校の先生でもない大学生。そんな僕が福島県双葉高校の高校生に1週間勉強を教えることになった。高校生と打ち解けられるかな。そんな中で部活の後輩のように話してくれる女の子がいた。人懐っこい笑顔を見せるペイちゃん。
あだ名はペイちゃんって呼んでください。三平なんでペイちゃんかおペイと呼ばれます。
ペイちゃんのふるさとは福島県双葉郡浪江町。原発から20キロ圏内にある。陸上が大好きなガリピー。彼女の夢はアスレチックトレーナー。でも震災の影響で数学の授業は週に2時間。思うように勉強ができないと言っていた。
ガリピーです。これは、部活の先生が間違って言ったのを聞いたし。
双葉高校は原発から 3.5 キロにある。高校生たちは親戚の家やアパートで今も避難生活を送っている。校舎は4つの高校に分かれ、友達とは離れ離れの生活だ。先生たちは授業のたびに校舎を移動している。
ペイちゃん。はい。じゃん。これを全部食べちゃう。
食べますよ。頑張ります。
食うね。
食べますよ。
食べますよ。そりゃあね。いや、勉強が一番痩せるらしいよ。
じゃあ今日痩せましたかね。3時間やったら。違うよ。明日行こう。明日6時間だから。そう。明日これでまだね、やっぱりいない。これ減点なんだ。これ。
ので、最終的にこれが2乗になってるからこれなんだよねっていうんだよね。わかる？
勉強の合間にみんなでフットサルもした。
絶対優勝します。
絶対優勝します。
負けないですから山田さんに。山田さんの顔にボール当てます私。
あまりいじめないでください。
頑張ります。
はい、頑張ってください。じゃあ点決めてください。
頑張ります。
はい。
でもあれシュート率50%切ります。
マジか。頑張ってください。
頑張ります。
一言。カメラに一言。
めっちゃ嬉しいです。
夜の女子部屋では本音で語るペイちゃんがいた。
自分の行きたい大学に行きたいなと思って。大きい大学に行って広い世界を見たいな。学研士の資格欲しいなと思って。
じゃあ保健師やるって言ったら福島でやる？
ああ、それは
地元で。
それは全然考えてないですね。
でもなんとなくいいなとは思って。
近くの多分保健師、なんか看護師だって夜勤とかも大変だし。
そうだね。
それになんか予防とかの方が私絶対好き。その注射させないよみたいな。
最終日、みんなで一緒に過ごした時間について一人ずつ話した。
進路の話とか、自分の陸上のことやってたことをいろいろ話して、それでその共感してもらえたことがすごく嬉しくて、この合宿参加して本当によかったです。
勉強もいろんなことが分かったけど、ちょっとやってみたら楽しいところがあったから、それから自分の勉強を本当に頑張りたいなと思いますし。
最後の夜、みんなで河川敷に行って花火をした。
ペイちゃんどうですか？
楽しいです。
ありふれた高校生の日常がそこにはあった。だけど高校生の心の中には僕が想像できない苦しみもあった。
福島だと 1. 何個とか 0. 何個は別に普通だって思っても、東京とか違う保育が 0. 何個かでも騒いでて、でそこはホットスポットだとか言ってて、福島の子は本当にひどいのに、なんで東京の子が騒いでるのって、先輩のお母さんから聞いた話は、千葉に避難した時に車を洗車しようとしたらば、予約ナンバーだったから洗車を断れるって言われた瞬間にすごい悲しくなって、なんでこんなに服って差別されるのかなって正直思ったんですよ。本当に神様は本当に新しくするのかなって正直思ったんですよ。31日に地震が起きて、その後原発が起きて、私も地震も本当に避難するようになって、普通に周り見ても放射線が目に見えるものじゃなくて、普通に鳥の鳴き声とかもするし、なんか喋って、普通に滑るのに、なんか あまりによくかけてきたんだろうと思って、こういうふうに話して、やっぱりこれのことを見ると、携帯だとか、福島県の戦車とか、そういう話ですけど、福島県の中でもそういう話があって、私たちの地域の車とか、それがいられませんとか、そういう話を福島県の中で言って、別に私たちがやったってやってきたわけでもないし、私の力で原発の実行でやりたくて、私たちがやる福島県が汚いと思われてて、全然違うことないのに、それを思われるの悲しくて。
ホットスポット、放射能汚染。福島に突きつけられた放射能差別という傷。ペイちゃんとガリピーは涙を流しながら必死にその現実に向き合おうとしていた。
じゃあ、大学生ここにいても帰れないと思うので、大学生がじゃあ帰りましょうか。ね、
夏が過ぎ、僕は東京で今まで通りの日常を取り戻していた。そんな中でもあの時の高校生たちがふとした時に気にかかっていた。1ヶ月後にペイちゃんから手紙が届いた。
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yuko Fujishima. I am one of the students who made the field. The region that has been severely devastated by the Great East Japan earthquake is called Tohoku. I was born in Tohoku, and it is where I grew up until I had to leave for Tokyo to enter university. Winters are harsh in Tohoku, which makes living conditions in that area extremely difficult. The main source of income is through agriculture and fishery. Generally speaking, Tohoku people are said to be honest, and they tend not to speak out their minds. The economic output of Tohoku contributes to the whole Japanese economy by a small percentage. In fact, Tohoku is one of the poorest regions in Japan. After World War II, most of the people in Tohoku, whenever free from farm work, migrated to Tokyo to get available temporary jobs. Moreover, a lot of towns had to invite power companies to build nuclear power plants to create local employment and develop their economy. As a Tohoku native, having experienced the Great Japan earthquake and witnessed the Fukushima nuclear power plant crisis unfold, has dealt a heavy blow on me. To see my hometown totally devastated, it was heartbreaking to listen to the survivors' dialects, which are so familiar to me on TV. Fukushima is also a part of Tohoku. Because of its poor economy, it had to open up to power companies to build nuclear power plants, which in turn supplied power to energy-hungry Tokyo. As we all know now, it is at the Fukushima nuclear plant number 1 where the dreadful and horrifying nuclear crisis happened. Through this volunteer work at Fukushima, it is where I have heard and witnessed firsthand the screaming of high school students as they couldn't release their feelings to anybody, to anywhere, but to us. One student told us that he couldn't go back to his house to take out his father's memento because his house is in the evacuation zone due to the high level of radiation. These high school students are hurt and also furious upon seeing discriminatory statements spreading on the internet, like, "Don't marry women exposed to radiation in Fukushima." My grandfather lives in Tohoku, and he is still engaged in planting rice crops, even though he is over 80 years old. During the period of rapid economic growth after World War II, when grandfather was free from field work, he too went to Tokyo to take up temporary jobs, like working at construction sites for tall buildings. He contributed to the whole Japanese economic growth, but his work was only for the development of Tokyo. Not a bit of tremendous wealth and economic growth ever trickled down to his hometown Tohoku. Economic poverty in Tohoku still prevails at present. Some people are depths of despair, which explains why Tohoku has the highest suicide rate among the regions in Japan. In the view of the number of population and economic development, Tohoku contributes a small percent to the whole of Japan. Policies are decided on this, so the gap between the small local regions and the larger cities continues to grow. However, the sadness and the suffering of the people cannot be judged by the statistics. Therefore, I am conveying to you the voices from Fukushima because I have heard these voices through my volunteer work, and also as a someone from Tohoku, I have been feeling the contradiction in the society. The Great East Japan earthquake was of course a natural disaster that has brought so much devastation. It also exposed the social structure discrepancy and the huge inequality between rural areas and the highly developed areas in Japan. I feel overwhelmed by the thought of this deeply rooted structure that could not be only changed by us, the people from Tohoku. So far, I cannot imagine concretely what I can contribute to this change. Nevertheless, I value much the honest expressions of feelings and thoughts of these high school students in Fukushima. They said, "Fukushima is not dirty. Why do we have to suffer so much?" As a person from Tohoku, I know that it's a big challenge for these students to express these feelings. It seems not too big a deal for other people to express these feelings, but Tohoku people are not good at speaking out their minds as the culture dictates. It is my hope that a change is happening now in the individual people in Fukushima, and that gives me a lot of optimism for the future. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Yuko. That was a thoughtful message. Lastly, I'd like to make my commentary on the achievement of the students. In the process of their activities and learning, I could propose 3 keywords today which could articulate the phenomenon. First is awareness. Through the volunteer work in the field, the students started to develop awareness, such as political awareness. They see and feel the realities and contradictions in the society. First-hand voices of the people concerned would have an impact to shake the emotions of the students, which in turn could make them feel the challenges of the society. In Yuko's case, she has been concerned about the discrepancy between Tohoku and Tokyo. Next word is identity. Being confronted with the challenges of the society, many students would like to grasp what has been happening in front of us and try to analyze the situation. These experiences would make some of the students think who they are. They recognize the significance of the viewpoint from which they stand for. Yuko has identified herself as a Tohoku native and tries to express herself in her presentation. And the third word is responsibility. It seems that in Japan, there are not many opportunities for the current student to feel the social responsibility in their daily lives. Volunteer work is one of the opportunities to share the responsibility for the people they met in the field. My students felt that they have to make the voices from Fukushima heard. Making a movie, which everybody saw, and today's Yuko's presentation as a concrete form, which shows their responsibilities. Knowing these processes It should be noted that we, as a faculty member of Volunteer Center, have tried to have a lot of reflection sessions with our students. This is our effort to support the students and give them the chances to challenge the existing value of the society. Since the huge earthquake and nuclear plant crisis, many of us professionals in Japan have been thinking what each individual should do. I myself have been rethinking my role and how to make action. I feel that it is also my mission to convey the voices from Fukushima herd who are now experiencing severe social discrimination, as you might watch today. It is based on my academic experience in gender and health, particularly stigma toward the minority in the society. Fukushima high school students told us that the only support they received during that crucial period right after the incident was from the crew and the ship from the US, Tomodachi mission. They said no supply trucks were coming from Tokyo. Our government has dumped us. Being thankful for the support from the US, their voices in Fukushima hit me hard, and at the same time, I felt the painful reality that we could not immediately save our own people in Fukushima. In that sense, responsibility is not only the word for the student to learn about from the experience. We adults should keep this word in our hearts and minds. The Fukushima nuclear plant was not built by the students. It was us. It was our government. It was our society who created it and benefited from it. Therefore, we are responsible for the consequences. I hope that the stories which my students presented today made all of us to recognize the meaning of our responsibility. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent presentations about the situation in Fukushima. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Nutter, Director, Office of Japanese Affairs, U.S. Department of State.
Thanks very much, Professor Uchida, and to the USJI for setting up this very important event today. And thanks especially to our friends from Tohoku and Waseda universities for offering us, I think, some very moving insights into the 3/11 disasters and their aftermath. I'm here this morning to talk briefly about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, as it is, I think, for many of you here, and that's expanding U.S.-Japan educational and other ties among our young people. And in particular, I'd like to talk about a very important and very special program that we in the U.S. government and many of our friends in the private sectors in both U.S. and Japan are pursuing. That's known as Tomodachi. I'm sure in the wake of 3/11, many of our non-Japanese speakers here learned what Tomodachi means. In Japanese, of course, it means friends or friendship. And Tomodachi is a program. You can see up there what the mission statement is. But I would just draw to your attention to three key themes of phrases. The first is public-private partnership. The second is next generation. And the third is deepen the friendship between our two countries. And really, this mission, I think, pervades everything Tomodachi does. And in many ways, really does help set, it's a model for a lot of the efforts that our two governments in the United States and Japan are undertaking right now to further deepen our two countries' ties. Just to explore a little further what some of these themes in the mission statement you just saw are. Really, the goal of Tomodachi is to create, is for the next generation of young people in both of our countries. You'll see there Secretary Clinton, I mean, she put it best in a speech she gave last October, that really Tomodachi is all about creating a Tomodachi generation of young people in both of our countries who are committed to a better and a stronger bilateral relationship. And really, to achieve this, Tomodachi strives to both strengthen existing opportunities for young people in both countries, but also to put our thinking caps on and try and come up with new and creative ways to build bridges between the young people in our two societies. On the subject of public-private partnership, why do we choose to go this route? Well, really, I mean, Tomodachi was a natural outgrowth of Operation Tomodachi, which Professor Muramatsu earlier showed us some very descriptive slides of what Operation Tomodachi was all about, namely the largest peacetime military operation ever between the U.S. and Japanese forces. And really, I think we discovered just how well we work together. And Tomodachi, which is a public-private partnership involving the U.S. government, Japanese government, particularly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also many in the private sector, not least the U.S.-Japan Council, and NGOs and corporations and private citizens in both of our countries. It's trying to bring together really the best of both the public and private sectors in the U.S. and Japan to pursue Tomodachi, the goal of which, of course, is building up the next generation in both our countries who are devoted to, committed to, expanding the ties and the friendship between our two countries. And then key, of course, is, and we believe that a public-private partnership can really help to strengthen the impact of whatever programs. I think by having the commitments of both of our governments, that really does help to undergird our efforts and to really, I think, show the depth of the commitment of both our countries. And of course, key to this is visibility as well. And I think you can so you can see here. Well, actually, I'll go to this slide here. Talking about visibility, I think you get a gold star if you can name all the celebrities in these photographs here. But really, we believe that by engaging passionate private individuals, celebrities, we can expand the reach and the understanding among our two peoples about the importance of Tomodachi. And really, Tomodachi is acting as a clearinghouse for a lot of good intentions that corporations and NGOs and others had out there after 3/11. A lot of corporations wanted to know how they could help. What could they do to contribute to the efforts to not just rebuild Tohoku, but also to help strengthen our two countries' ties. And Tomodachi helps to coordinate between the efforts of corporations, NGOs, private individuals with local leaders, local NGOs who can really help to shape the programs we have out there and to help direct need, or to help direct aid and to those who need it the most, and the programs that we think will succeed the best. I think we heard earlier and that we saw in the movie about the story about Peichan. Well, here's another story, and really I don't mean to be blithe about it, but this is sort of our target audience. This young lady, Ayako Ogawa. And I don't know if you can read her letter there, but she's a young lady who lost her entire family on 3/11. And she had the opportunity to meet with Ambassador Roos when he traveled to Tohoku. And then on a couple of subsequent occasions, they had the chance to meet. And in the letter, as you may be able to read, she expressed her really transformation from a young lady who had lost all hope to someone who now had a dream to, once she completed high school, to try and save some money and eventually learn English and then maybe study in the United States. And so she is Tomodachi. She is what we're all about. And she's, since then, I mean, you can see in some of the photos here, she even met, in the lower left there, Justin Bieber. Of course, there's the ambassador in the top right. But she is among many, many individuals who we see as the Tomodachi generation, as the type of individual we would like to grab a hold of and help to realize their dreams. Getting to some specifics about Tomodachi and what we're striving to achieve, really there are three main areas, as you'll see. educational academic programs, sports, music, and cultural programs, and then entrepreneurship and leadership programs. And we've made some real great progress in all three broad areas. Just highlight for you can see for yourselves the kind of programs we have up there, but really two of the flagship programs in terms of education and student exchanges. We've got the Tomodachi Summer Leadership Program at Berkeley, which will host up to 300 high school students from the Tohoku area to spend time during the summer and learn more about the United States and then bring those experiences back with them to Tohoku. And then hopefully that will lead eventually to further study in the US and then further creation of our Tomodachi generation. We've also got the Tomodachi Homestay Program, which as you'll see is 60 high school students per year. And there are many, many others involving Tohoku University and other institutes of higher education, both in the US and in Japan. We also have sports, arts, and cultural exchange programs. One that received a lot of attention in Japan several months ago was when Cal Ripken visited and met with young folks, baseball players there in Tohoku. Major League Baseball here in the US is making efforts to help rebuild destroyed baseball grounds, replenish teams, baseball equipment, lockers, that sort of thing. And actually, in terms of music exchanges, we have coming up very, very soon, the Amakia Taiko drummer group will be coming to Washington to participate in the Cherry Blossom Centennial events. So I hope you all will come out and see that and show your support for them. And then, of course, we have our entrepreneurship and leadership programs. This is something that's very close to Ambassador Roos, himself a big supporter in his previous life of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And so really, through these three main areas, Tomodachi seeks to broaden and deepen the ties between our two countries, seeks to create a Tomodachi generation, seeks really to strengthen for the next 100 years our two countries' relationship. And you'll see up there, how best to get involved with Tomodachi. For those of you who have immediate questions or ideas or ways you'd like to get involved, we actually have two representatives today from the US-Japan Council, Saki and Anna. If you guys want to raise your hands, and they can fill you in on Tomodachi in greater detail and how to help. But thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your presentation on Tomodachi project. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Daniel August, Deputy Vice President, Institute of International Education.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank Professor Ushida and USJI for inviting me to participate here today, and also thank you for your vision of including a few students here on this panel. I think it is so important when we discuss youth exchanges to actually hear your voices, so I really appreciate that. I've been asked to speak about fostering or expanding educational exchanges between the United States and Japan. And so what I thought of doing is to just give you a very brief overview of some of the current trends in educational exchange, both in American students studying abroad in Japan, but also Japanese students and scholars coming to the United States, and some reasons for the changes. And there's some good news and some bad news, but I also hope that there's a beacon of hope in expanding the educational exchanges. But before I get into the details of this, just a brief word of introduction about the Institute of International Education. For those of you who are not familiar with IIE, IIE is one of the oldest and largest nonprofit organizations involved in the educational exchange of students and scholars. IIE was founded in 1919, so more than 90 years ago, with the mission of mutual understanding and exchanging minds. Our slogan is opening minds to the world. Every year we manage about 250 different scholarship and student exchange programs, programs for faculty members, for professionals, and so on. And one of the largest programs we manage on behalf of the US Department of State is the Fulbright program. So we work very closely, of course, with the Japan Fulbright Commission and with many other commissions around the world. What I would like to talk about now is mostly referring to statistics that IIE has collected for the last 60 years or so called Open Doors. It's the Open Doors report for the international exchange of students and scholars. And we collect these statistics by surveying American colleges and universities, and this research is done on behalf of the US Department of State. And so I'll start with the good news, and that is American students studying abroad in Japan. That number has been increasing for the past years. As you can see from this bar graph here, there are now about 6,000 American students studying abroad in Japan. Most of the American students that study abroad go abroad for quite a short term, like a summer term or a semester or so. But so this is good news. The number has doubled since 2001. In the past years, it's been relatively flat, but this last year we saw an increase of about 7%. So that is good news. However, when we put it into the context of some other countries, it's interesting to see the difference here. There are 14,000 American students studying abroad in China, and there are 30,000 American students who go to the UK. But then if we look at some other countries, for example, India and Brazil, the number of Americans going to Japan is double than that. So it's somewhere in the middle there. There are many opportunities for American students who want to study in Japan and in other countries, and I'll just list a few here, and I'll not talk about each of them because I assume the presentations will be also on the website, but there's of course the Fulbright program, but also the Benjamin Gilman Scholarship Program, which is a US government-funded program for American undergraduate students to study abroad. There are the Bourne Awards for International Study, and the Freeman Asia Awards for Study in Asia, which also help American undergraduate students with scholarship funding. And all of these programs are administered by IIE. And the last program, there's IIE's Global Engineering Education Exchange, which is a consortium of about 70 institutions around the world. And Tohoku University is our member in Japan. Now to the bad news, and that's Japanese students studying in the US. And you see from that from that line, that it's a very steep drop. Since 2001, the numbers of Japanese students studying in the United States dropped by more than 50%. Last year alone, the drop was 14%. And if we look at just the undergraduate Japanese students coming to the US, that dropped by 20%. Japan used to be in the top 5 sending countries to the US for the past several decades. It now is number 7. And in 1994 to 1998, Japan was the leading country sending students to the United States. So those have been really dramatic changes that we need to look at more closely and how we can reverse these changes. Again, if we put this into context with some other countries, China, India, South Korea, there are 21,000 students from Japan in the US and 157,000 students from China, 100,000 from India, and about 74,000 from South Korea. And if we look at this, this bar graph, this line represents the enrollments of Japanese students in intensive English language programs in the US, and that number also has dropped quite precipitously in the past decade, about a 15% drop alone in the last year. And if we look at the number of Japanese scholars who are in the US to teach or conduct research at colleges and universities here, that number has been relatively flat for the past years or so, but then in the last year, that number has also dropped quite precipitously. And now if we look at some of the reasons for why we see these numbers declining, and I think there are many reasons. Some of them are real, some of them are perceived challenges. Just to talk a few of them, of course, one key reason is demographics. There are fewer college-age students in Japan, so there are fewer students coming to college in Japan, and therefore fewer students who study abroad in other countries. There's economic issue. There's a recession that drives incomes down in Japan. US tuition rates have been increasing, so it makes it increasingly challenging for Japanese students to come to the US. And we conducted a survey last year together with JUSEC in Japan on the attitudes and perceptions of Japanese students who want to study in the United States, and the number one obstacle was cost. There are some changes in terms of seeking for job opportunities, and I'd be curious to hear from the students here if that is actually true or not. But Japanese students are starting to look for employment earlier, so in their junior year rather than waiting for their senior year, which poses challenges for if students want to come and study in the United States, either for a full degree or even just for an exchange. There are different issues related to sponsorship. Japanese companies have begun to sponsor study abroad in China rather than the US, also sending students to other regions around the world. Then there's some perceived challenges that a degree at a Japanese university is seen as much more valuable than a US degree. On the other hand, we hear that Japanese businesses are starting to recruit more candidates from overseas because many Japanese students lack the global competence or so. So there's some challenges in that sense. And just a few more comments from this recent survey that we conducted. While the survey indicated that the US is still the most popular destination for Japanese students, I mean, that's largely because of the wide range of schools, the high quality of the academic institutions and programs in the US, and the good student support services at US colleges and universities. There were a few challenges that were mentioned. One is that many Japanese students indicated that the US appears to not be a safe place to study. So Australia, Canada were much safer places to study. Many said it was difficult to get a visa. Many others also said that Canada had a better lifestyle for students. So, and again, cost was one of the major obstacles. And one last interesting finding in this survey was that Japanese students, especially when compared to students from other Asian countries, indicated a much stronger influence from their teachers, professors, parents, and friends. So I think if we talk about expanding educational exchanges, it is very important not to just think about the students, but also about the parents, the educators, and so on. Just a few kind of more good news, proactive items that we're trying to be engaged in, and also the US Embassy in Japan. There is an upcoming educational fair in Tokyo on September 15th that the US Embassy is sponsoring. It's called America Expo 2012, and we expect many American colleges and universities to come to that fair to meet with students and parents or teachers. So I encourage you to tell all your friends, please. Then there are the Education USA advising offices. And for those of you who haven't heard about Education USA, that's a State Department-sponsored network of educational advisors that provide free and unbiased services to students and others who are interested in studying in the US. There are many advisors based in Japan, and I recommend that you look them up when you're there, or tell your students who want to study in the US and need a little bit more information. And then finally, there's a scholarship directory that IIE publishes every year called Funding for United States Study. It's also online, and that includes about 1,000 scholarship and fellowship opportunities for students who have issues with cost. And then one of my last slides is about just looking again at the more global picture, not just the exchange between Japan and the US, but where are Japanese students going in general. There are about 44,000 Japanese students who studied abroad, and 2009 is the year for which the latest statistics are available. But as you see, the vast majority of those students, 61%, are going to the United States. So the US is still a very powerful destination and a powerful partner. And last but not least, and this is to the Japanese audience here, if institutions are interested in attracting more American students to Japan, there's also a resource for this that IIE produces called IIE Passport. It's a study abroad directory and online search engine that includes now almost 10,000 study abroad programs for American students. And we have about 150 programs listed in Japan, mostly by US organizations that run programs there. So, but having the listings in the book and on the website are completely free, so I encourage all the Japanese universities to list their study abroad opportunities there. So I will end here, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation on US-Japan education exchange. And we received very interesting presentation from rather different angles on the issue of the interaction of youth between US and Japan. And so from now on, we we'll start question and answer session. But I'm afraid that the time is very much limited, so I wonder how many people would like to ask a question or raise a comment? 5 minutes? All right. Okay. So, yeah. Then I would like to receive your question first from the floors. Then after I receive your questions and ask these panelists to answer to your questions. So please identify yourself and raise your question and give a comment as brief as possible. Okay, then raise your hand. Anyone? Yes, please. Gentleman was
Yes, I do. Yes, Dave Fitzgerald, retired government, now private consultant. Question perhaps for Mr. Napper. In terms of the funding, specific fundings about U.S. government support for Operation Tomodachi, has there been a significant increase in budgets for exchanges with Japan in the wake of the disaster in the last couple of years? Has there been a significant effort in terms of government funding, not private sector funding, but government funding to expand educational opportunities for Americans in Japan? If you could comment on that trend.
Sure, thank you very much. That's a good question, and I wish I had great news that I could offer, but unfortunately, given the budget environment right now, across the boards, for most government agencies, State Department not excluded, there's a lot of pressure on budgets for exchange programs and other educational endeavors, and I think Japan is no exception in that. But we are trying very creative ways to look at the budgets we do have, recognizing that exchange programs, U.S. government-funded exchange programs with Japan are very critical at this time, and so we're doing our best, working with Kolkan, working with Mansfield Foundation and other of our partners around town and really around the country to try and figure out ways to use the budgets we have available to continue our robust exchange programs and hopefully expand them where we can.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tomo Koyama. I work from Nagoya University. It is located in central Japan. This question is Mr. August. What should we do to attract more talented U.S. students to Japanese universities? Changing the teaching in English or changing the school calendar? What is the most effective way to suggest?
Very good question. And I have a few thoughts, but they are definitely not comprehensive. One is definitely English language instruction is very important. The vast majority of American undergraduate students do not speak a foreign language, and if they do, they speak Spanish. So I think that is a challenge. And Europe has been very effective at recently launching many more programs offered in English, and we've seen a strong increase in students going there. So I think that could definitely be something. American students study abroad for short term, as I mentioned, especially for summer terms or a January term. So offering short-term programs are a good option. And then I think this whole notion of volunteerism, service learning, and internships is also something to explore. We see trends in American students going abroad specifically to engage in volunteer or service learning projects, but also in internship projects. And I think Japan there could be a really interesting location for American students to engage in really strong internships in the corporate sector or NGO sector. So those are just a few thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Good morning. Grace Rush from the East West Center in Washington, and also a former ryugakusei at Waseda University, and a recipient of the Freeman Asia Scholarship to study in Shigaken in my undergrad. So thank you to everyone at this table for helping make those possible. At any rate, I've been doing a lot of research on what happened in Japan after the disasters last year. And I've been reading about the volunteerism and just this incredible uptick amongst the students and people in Japan in general in going off and volunteering. But the reports also said that previous to this, that volunteerism was relatively rare in Japan. And I was wondering, first of all, is that true? If so, why is this? And do you see this increased interest in volunteerism as something that is a permanent trend, or just in response to this disaster? And I would welcome the insights of both the students and those from the universities today. Thank you.
I think after the disaster occurred, the volunteer work of college students increased a lot. And in my opinion, before the disaster occurred, there were some volunteer works, but college students didn't know the details of volunteer work, so that's why the volunteer work was not famous among the college students. But in fact, there are some students who took part in volunteer work before the disaster occurred.
Yeah, I'm also I also think the number of students doing volunteer work dramatically increased after tsunami in Eastern Japan. And yeah, like every time big disaster happened in Japan, the number of people doing volunteer work increased more and more. So I think, yeah, it's true that it's true that students now interested in their own community, and they're also, how can I say? Yeah, they took initiative to reconstruct their society.
Okay, something else. Yes.
Yeah, I just cannot keep my mouth shut about that point. My name is Erika Membridge, and I came here as a Fulbright grantee, and now I'm working for Harvard University. I really enjoy living in this society, and I got a lot of benefit. But when I feel a little insulted, it's the time that American people say, "Oh, I can help you. I can do something for you," and that's a very difficult thing for me to get somebody's, favor. And I think that's in Japanese culture, that you have to help yourself. You shouldn't depend on other people's favor. So it's not that people don't want to give, but people don't want to get favor. So that's the underlying probably in the past. Probably it's changing, but I just can't keep my mouth shut. And I have several other things to say. I found it very interesting that high school students said they're discriminated because in Fukushima, And after the disaster, Japanese or people in the world praised how Japanese society is well controlled, no riot, no theft, and nobody talk about discrimination. But these are two sides of coin, both sides of coin, that sure there's no riot because people know each other and it's a very homogeneous society. But that's good part, but the bad part is because it's such a homogeneous society, people discriminate anybody who's a bit off from the society. So in order to cope with the future disaster, you have to understand the sociological structure, I guess. And also, I have some suggestion about this presentation. It's always conducted in English, and it was a wonderful presentation from students and professors. But I think it's possible to do the presentation in Japanese and use the volunteer interpreters. I would love to do volunteer interpreter because if you limit presenter who can speak in English, that's a bit of a challenge to bring any motivated students. Yeah, that's just a scattering idea in my mind. Oh, and the one last thing is, yes, when you talk about exchange, you always talk about high culture and academic scholarly aspect. But most of the students who want to visit Japan, like a JET program, they love Japan because of manga and Tokyo Kawaii and fashion and very underground culture. So from now on, probably it's a very good idea to not to ignore a very, not uptight culture, but somewhat hidden, low aspect of cultural exchange in Japan and US.
Can I just add one comment on this? This is actually a very important point that you make, and I would almost argue that there is, at least with some undergraduate students, an emphasis on going on programs that are more culturally interesting than academically valuable. So I think there needs to be a combination of both exchanges that have an academic value, but also have take into account the interesting cultural components of the country or city that they're visiting. And I think the types of projects that you mentioned would make very interesting study abroad programs.
Hi, I'm Damon Robinson. I was also an exchange student at Waseda, and I think we were there at the same time.
We were.
So while I was there, I actually did some research and fieldwork on some of the disparities found within Tokyo. And Ms. Fujishima and Professor Hyodo made some really interesting points about how awareness of social disparity throughout Japan has bubbled up, I guess, after the disaster. And I was wondering if there are any of the areas that are the non-Tokyo areas working together to do something about the disparities, or is there dialogue going on from places that have similar feelings, I guess, towards Tokyo? Thank you.
You mean at the student level?
At any level, student or government or just internet boards or anything.
Well, maybe she can comment on the internet part, but as far as I know that something like social minority, like single mothers, are really talking, like single mother group in Tokyo and the single mothers in Tohoku, really networking a lot. That kind of the phenomenon are really happening. And what else? The person with wheelchair, that kind of group, it's actually from Tokyo to Tohoku, and also from foreigners as well, right? So, yeah, like you said, it's been happening, hopefully. What about internet?
like on the internet social networking service SNS, there are some groups that loves a particular singer or actor or sports players, and from like Tokyo or from Osaka, from Hokkaido, can enjoy together the conversations. I only know about something like that. So yeah, I want to know more details about the cultural exchange of the local areas of Japan.
1, 2, 3. You're first.
Saki Takasu from the US-Japan Council. Thank you again for the very encouraging movement that the students are doing, and I think it's especially wonderful to see so many volunteers rise up. I'd actually like to direct the questions to the academics and also Watanabe-san and Fujishima-san. As there are so many students who are encouraged and energized currently, is there a possibility that some of these students can go on to the nonprofit sector in Japan, strengthening the nonprofit? And are there curriculums or other opportunities and paths open to them so they can join nonprofit organizations?
Can I take the question from you? Then after that, I'll ask this.
Hello, my name is Ned. I'm an intern with USJI. I was also fortunate enough to receive the Freeman Asia Foundation Award to study at Sophia University for 1 year, so I'd like to thank IIE for that. And as Ms. Hyodo mentioned, a lot of people in Fukushima felt abandoned. So my question is to Mr. Knapper. How does the self-defense force, how have they been reacting to Operation Tomodachi? Are they equally supportive? Are they willing to provide their resources as well? I don't know if you can answer that. That's my question. Thank you.
Hi, this is Eileen Lin from the Formosan Association for Public Affairs. I'm an alumnus of JET program, so I was sent to Ehime Prefecture for 3 years and I worked at the City Hall. I remember there was a typhoon disaster when I first got there, and I was one of the volunteers that went to the houses and shoveled dirt for like a day. And I didn't remember seeing a lot of young people there, and just hearing from the panelists today, there's like an increase of volunteerism in a disaster. How do you have a strategy, whether it's within the volunteer groups or within the school or nonprofit organizations, to sustain this volunteerism for the future? Because disaster happens, it happens, but not, but for a long run, when I mean, just for short term, it looks like there's an increase, but is there a strategy for long term to sustain that volunteerism?
I think students who are interested in NLP, working in NLPs and NGOs in police, active rights movement. And as I told you before, like new model of social business or CSR are born around after disaster. So I think students have more chance to work in Tohoku and for something to make better society in Japan.
I think there are a few students who continue to work at non-profit organizations. So most of the people who took part in volunteer works go to the private company, I think. So there are very few, but it's getting. I think, but so as Ms. Watanabe said, there are some new generations who continues to work at NPO. That's all.
Well, anyway, as the time is very much limited, so thank you very much for your interesting and valuable comments. And so at the end of this session, I would like to receive final comment from those panelists. Napa-san, I understand also Napa-san, there's some special question to Mr. Napa.
Sure, I'll answer that really quickly. Well, certainly the U.S. military and a number of U.S. government agencies like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission played, had the honor and privilege of playing roles to help with the recovery right after 3/11. I think really we can't forget that the bulk of the recovery and rescue operations were handled by the Japanese self-defense forces, and really they had primary responsibility for efforts to rescue and recover. And so, well, I think we had certain very visible roles, like in the recovery of Sendai Airport. I think it's important to stress that the Japanese SDF really did play the most prominent role after the disasters of March 11th.
All right, thank you very much. Then I would like to ask all the panelists to make a final comment in a brief way. Yes, yes.
Great, thank you very much, first of all, for this panel. Maybe just 2 points. One would be something that Professor Hyodo raised, her 3 main words that she described the situation: awareness, identity, and responsibility, really struck me. And I think in many ways, when we look especially at the student exchanges in the US, you could use those 3 words for the September 11th attacks as well. And many American students had increased awareness, a new sense of identity and responsibility. And we've actually seen an outward awareness and many more American students going to study abroad after that. So I think that was very positive, and it kind of struck me. And then my other comment would be, in order to expand exchanges, and now I'm talking mostly about the academic exchanges, I think one really important way of doing this is through institutional linkages between American universities and Japanese universities that are mutually beneficial, and those kind of exchanges can increase, those kind of linkages can increase exchanges in a sustainable way, and those are exchanges that are not just student and faculty exchanges, what we would call the transactional type exchanges, but it really can become a transformative process for the institutions that involve the community. So that would be my comment.
Yes. Well, again, thanks very much for this panel today, and especially it was great to meet so many American young people who studied in Japan. I would just encourage as much as we can getting Americans over to Japan. And someone raised earlier this issue of kind of high culture versus high academics versus so-called maybe lower culture. But I would say, really it gets to, Japan's soft power, I think, can and should be utilized more in terms of attracting American students to Japan, whether it's manga or anime or sports. Things like Japanese filmmaking. These are all areas that can and really should attract American students to Japan. So while it's heartening that the number of Americans in Japan is relatively steady, 6,600 I guess was the number, I think it can be twice that, and I really would challenge a lot of folks here to try and get more American young people to Japan to really help create this Tomodachi generation, which we talked about earlier. Thank you.
I appreciate the support from the US, and I also happy to come here. Thank you very much.
Just make a brief comment in terms of sustainable system to support the volunteerism in general in Japan. Well, I really have to thank the ex-president of Waseda University who established the volunteer center. I've been paid by the university for supporting students sustainably. I think this was really great, one of the systems, university system. Well, I should say so many universities in Japan has been visiting us. How are we going to make a management for the student to go to Tohoku? So this is one thing that I really have to appreciate. And another thing that I was to comment on the professor from Harvard University, right? And so sorry. One of the mental barrier for the student not to go to volunteer work in Japan is exactly what she said. Many students hesitate to do something for the people, victims, whatever it is called. They really think they are the one who's supposed to wake up, who really have to go on. We are not the one who have to do something. So helping really, how to say, sensitive issue in Japan. So, but still, I really think this earthquake has been awakening that taboo, really, how do you say, break the taboo of that the feeling. I'm not saying it's not good or bad, but it is really challenging the existing value of Japan. That's my comment. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for having me here today, and I'm really glad I'm really glad that I can visit Washington D.C. again. Washington D.C. is one of my favorite cities I have ever visited. And if you have a chance to come to Tohoku and Japan, please contact me and I can guide around Tohoku. Thank you.
So I was invited from the Waseda University. So unfortunately, Tohoku University don't have such a system, the volunteer center and support to the student volunteers. So unfortunately, the Tohoku University is the National University of Japan. So National University, in generally speaking, the national universities don't have such devices to support the voluntary activities and so on. It's a problem. So we wish to change this devices to we hope this curriculum on the voluntary activities, for example, voluntary lectures and so on, even in the national universities. So if such the devices are established, so the Tohoku University can approach to the Waseda University's activities. So in addition to this, I want to say the very important things. That the students of the Tohoku University is also disaster people. Okay, then they maybe has experienced the terrible earthquakes that day. So they maybe gets a flashback so much times. So just now they overcome such experiences. They want to do the volunteer activities. So 1 year after such a disasters, we make a chance for them to take voluntary activities. So I introduce you that day there was some event at the Tohoku University. So it's a kickoff for the continuous support to those people. It means that Tohoku University people, they want to join the voluntary activities in the future. So when they overcome the very awful experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We had a very interesting and valuable and useful discussion among us. So I don't need to sum up the sections. And I understand that many viewers would like to continue to talk with the presentators and also to discuss. So lunch will be served outside of this room and in the corridors. And so you may bring back dishes to this room and to discuss during the lunch. And anyway, once again, we'd like to thank all the presentators for their excellent presentation and also the very nice comment from the audience. Thank you very much indeed.